Eva's really, helping coaches achieve true individualization and impact with their athletes. And what I love about Eva's solution is we just need a stopwatch. We can do it short course in any pool configuration. We're launching our long course module soon. And it really is applicable at swimmers of all standards who are aspiring to compete at junior national level and up, because this will help them get there. So over to Eva, and yeah, again, any questions, pop them in the chat box, and Eva can deal with those at the end of the session. Thank you.
Hi guys. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about 3MT Physiological Profiling. So for us, it's a tool that we try to develop to kind of provide you with powerful data, but in the most practical and accessible way possible for your environment. So just to start with, I came from a swimming background. I was always interested in swimming. I had some bad and good experiences in swimming, and those kind of motivated me to bring solution to swimming. For me, what I try to do, or what I try to kind of solve with the work we do, is to bring physiological testing, profiling, and individualized training prescription to the lowest level, so to clubs, so we can bring up more talent and also give most of the swimmers the chance to reach their maximum potential. So as John said, I work as a physiologist for Swimming Strong, and at the same time I work as a performance scientist for American company called Flex. So let's start with the first slide. So for me, when we're talking about profiling or prescribing training, for me, I kind of guide myself with 3P principle. So in order for the training to be effective, we would like to profile the swimmer, ideally, so we know what their strengths are and weaknesses. Also, we would like to see how they show themselves in their performance. So we do the performance analysis, which we discussed last week with John. And then ideally, we want to close the circle. So we actually work on the weaknesses and also maintain the strengths. That's why what we are trying to do at Swimming Strong is to allow you to kind of interconnect things. So you will see that later. So when we kind of think about swimming, I see swimming obviously as a beautiful sport, but the pain is that small improvements and mistakes often cost us positions and medals. Obviously, the aim is to obtain the fastest time in the given event. But when we actually kind of drill down and look what factors influence that, we kind of come to this kind of an overview, right? So when you look at the performance, we are looking that the performance is created through kind of 4 domains. We are talking about physiology, we talk about technique, we talk about tactics, and then we talk about psychology. So I like to kind of explain it in a way like when we train, physiologically speaking, we are trying to optimize the engine and the size of engine. Then in terms of the technique, we are trying to work with the engine as effectively as possible, so technically proficient. Then in terms of the tactics, we want to utilize that engine and that technique in the best way possible so we can reach the potential in the race and how we train for. And then in terms of the psychology, obviously, you want to apply yourself the best way you can in the race and in training, and that ultimately then leads to performance. But if we had to kind of choose 2 of the domains of the performance that impact the performance the most in swimming, what we tend to see is that the physiology and technique explain the most of the performance in swimmers. So if I start with physiology, then when we're thinking about physiology, we automatically should be thinking about energy systems, because those energy systems are influencing the speed we see in the pool. So we kind of know that we have 3 energy systems. We have very fast energy system that is called ATP PCR, phosphocreatine, that is working without oxygen, or it's called anaerobic system. It's allowing us to supply us with energy maybe up to 15, at most 20 seconds. Then we have anaerobic system, it's called glycolytic system, that can last a bit longer, but still works without oxygen. And then finally, we have the last system, oxidative system, that works with the oxygen, and it's called aerobic system. And that can't provide us with as much intensity, but it can last, and it can be used for a very long time. And the reason why it's important to understand the energy system is the fact that they all influence the outcome we see in the pool. It's just the distribution is changing as the distance is coming up in swimming. So we can see nicely in here that as the distance is coming up, aerobic system is taking bigger proportion of the energy that we need to swim that event. And as the distance is coming down in terms of the even more anaerobic system is kicking in. But it doesn't mean, like, sometimes coaches are asking me that should I then focus on the system that is the most important? Well, usually you can, like, the simplest terms, yes, because that is going to give you, the biggest return. But we can't afford to neglect the system, because we just said that swimming, there are only the small improvements, mistakes are influencing the outcome we see. So ideally, yes, we should focus on the system that we're utilizing mostly in that event, but we shouldn't neglect the other part of the system, because at some point it's gonna show in the performance. So in order to actually see if your swimmer is swimming the given event and whether they are up to standard in that specific event, what we need to do is to profile them, whether they are sufficiently good in aerobic system or anaerobic system, so we then know what they need to work on. So we could have a situation, for example, when we have 100 freestyler, we would classify them as a sprinter, but we don't actually know if the aerobic system is holding them back. Naturally, you would think that anaerobic system is the main one that we need to work on, but actually weaker aerobic system might be actually preventing them from progression. So if I was to kind of summarize why we profile, then we want to achieve an insight into fitness and technique of the swimmer, because once we achieve that insight, then we can better understand those parameters, and ultimately those parameters are going to underpin the performance we see in the pool. Also, probably even more important point for me, when we actually profile somebody, we can get a nice picture of their individual profile, so we can individualize their training process and also standardize the training process. Sometimes when you put the training session on a piece of paper, and you kind of think that you are giving the same session to everyone because the numbers look the same. Actually, if we were to measure metabolic response in that swimmer, we could kind of easily find out that different swimmers are working in different intensities. Also, when we profile regularly, which is an issue in swimming where we don't profile as regularly as we should be doing, then we can actually see the progress of the swimmer, and we can double check ourselves if the training program we are prescribing is actually working, if the time the swimmer is spending and you are spending on prescribing training and then swimming is actually making sense and it's showing improvements. Also, if we use the data, we can better individualize things in terms of the prescription of the load, so we can help swimmers to actually optimize the load process, so we avoid under or over prescription of training, which is then obviously linked with overtraining or illness and injury. And ultimately, we want to profile to help each swimmer and obviously the coach to coach better, to help athletes to maximize their performance when it matters the most. So when it comes to profiling, we usually profile, as I said, to understand the physiology. But for you guys as coaches, you want to measure the profile so you can actually prescribe training zones for the swimmer. Probably every coach is using some form of training zones, and you guys are using probably one of these measures in order to give swimmer the training zone or training zone system, so you know where to put them when they want to work on aerobic system, glycolytic system, or speed system, so phosphocreatine system. So we usually, sometimes we use blood lactate when we have the money. We sometimes use VO2 if we have a lot of money. Then we sometimes use heart rate in most of the situations, either through sensors or if we just put the fingers on the neck and then we count in order to get the heart rate. Sometimes we just use session RPE, so 1 to 10 scale, or we kind of look at the swimmer and see if their skin is pale or it's a bit more pink or it's purple or green. And then sometimes coaches are using stroke mechanics in order to kind of see in which training zone the swimmer is. So when we kind of go to, yeah, there we go. So but when we kind of support ourselves with the research, then actually we have only 4 training zones or physiological responses and in research. So we have zone 1, and that is divided from zone 2 with threshold called aerobic threshold or lactate threshold. You can see in this table what we kind of looking for. We have resting levels of blood lactate. We have elevated heart rate and VO2, but they typically stabilize in short time. And if I was to kind of speak to the swimmer, they should be holding conversation with you or with their mate. Then we have zone 2, and that is divided from zone 3 with a threshold called anaerobic threshold or critical speed. And in this zone 2, you have elevated blood lactate levels, VO2 heart rate, but they usually stabilize in slightly longer time than in zone 1, but they do stabilize. In this zone, you can use full sentences, but once you step over this threshold, critical speed anaerobic threshold, things get far more complicated because you are kind of going on borrowed time. As soon as you come over, you can kind of think that you have a battery and you start eating into the battery. And once you eat into that, you're going to reach your maximum blood lactate score and your VO2 and heart rate is going to climb to its maximum level and you're going to reach the fatigue. It's just a matter of time. And then we have zone 4. That's divided from zone 3 with the maximum speed that allows us to elicit VO2 max. And in here, your blood lactates are raising to maximum levels. But in here, you can't reach VO2 max because the activity is so intense that the metabolism kind of switches off before it allows you to reach VO2 max. So if I was to kind of summarize what each zone is for, your zone 1 is kind of for base fitness-based development. Zone 2 is still aerobic, but there is a mixture of glycolytic system coming into the game, at least by the time the metabolism stabilizes. Once you go over the threshold, you are tapping into your glycolytic system more. And once you come into zone 4, you are mainly working on an anaerobic system. But I will talk about how to develop each of these thresholds later on. The good thing is that, in swimming, we are using many training zones models, and that's completely fine. Ultimately, all training zones are used to develop those 3 energy systems. It's just important to understand how they kind of compare to the training zones we are using or what research is suggesting, or if you guys want to use our system, then it's important that we kind of relate those training zones to the system that you used previously. So you can see here that in British swimming terms, zone A1 is equivalent to our zone 1, then A2, AT threshold is zone 2, zone 3 is VO2, LP, lactate production, lactate tolerance, and speed is on zone 4. Or if you use RPE scores, then you can go 1 to 4 is zone 1, 5 to 7 is zone 2, 8 to 10 is zone 3, and zone 4 is the maximum with number 10 for RPE. So when we kind of decide what kind of training zone system are gonna use, then it's very important that you kind of know at least basic information about how the training zone model is created. And it's completely up to you what you decide for, but there are kind of three benchmarks how sports scientists decide what kind of training zone model to use. So we are talking about validity. So we want to use the system that is valid and the profiling on that system is going to give us something that is accurate and precise. So when I use the training zone model and I put the swimmer to swim in the training zone, I know what the response I'm going to get. So for example, if I decide to put swimmer at this pace and I want to work on VO2, then I know that set is going to create response for VO2 and not for lactate production, let's say, or tolerance. Then what we want is for the training zone system or profiling or testing battery to be reliable. So when you repeat that testing, you are sure, or as sure as possible, that the change you managed to create as a coach and as a swimmer is true change and is not because the test or system is unreliable, so it has a lot of error. And probably the most important factor is the practicality. So when you want to use good profiling, ideally you want it to be regular. So you can check after ideally each cycle whether you manage to elicit the change you were looking for with individual swimmers. And then you can use that data to re-prescribe for the following cycle. Ideally in swimming, we want to test more than just one stroke. Like if you are at club levels where you are trying to support development of all strokes or at least development of 2 strokes, where you have IM swimmers, there is very little kind of point to just test in freestyle if you have a breaststroker where the energy systems or energy cost is very different. So we want to have a battery of tests that are going to allow us to test ideally more than just one stroke. Then we are looking for the practicality in terms of the fact that it needs to take minimal amount of the time and it shouldn't really impact too much on the training session. And finally, is the resources. So ideally, you don't want to pay a physiologist to come and analyze things for you, but ideally you want to complete that even with your swimmers and use at least equipment you can do. So this is where I would like, before I go to actually showing you 3MT, I would like to use a few examples of the systems that we use in swimming and kind of highlight the issues we have. So in most of the swimming federations or national governing bodies in swimming, we tend to use heart rate zone systems where we use maximum heart rate to set up standardized training zones. And this is just an example on a group of swimmers where we have 10 swimmers. You can see the age of the swimmers. We can see the maximum heart rate we got from a step test. So that's a maximum test where the swimmers go to exhaustion. And most of the times, coaches just use a predictive equation in order to get the maximum heart rate. So you can see in here that 220 minus age would only work for 2 swimmers out of the 10. 2.8 minus 0.7 times age would work better. But the issue is that before we even start using that system, so percentage of maximum heart rate or beats below max, and if we use one of these methods, we are already starting the process with an error. Then we have a issue with fixed heart rate zones or personal best plus number of seconds or fixed blood lactate scores. So sometimes coaches use 2 millimoles for first threshold and 4 millimoles for the second, or they use PV plus certain amount of the seconds to get the training zones, or we get a fixed beats below max or percentages of heart rate max in order to get the zones. So just to highlight what I'm trying to say, that everyone is individual and we should be profiling. You have 2 swimmers in here with a similar maximum heart rate. There's just 1 beat difference with a similar personal best time for the time trial they've done. So they're 2:15, 2:15. So, and they have the same maximum heart rate. So if we were to use the percentages of maximum heart rate or even PB plus, we would make a mistake with one of these swimmers, because if you were to look at the threshold with beats below max method or even percentages of heart rate max method would put the swimmer to swim in between these 165, 155, 164, 154. But the actual heart rate associated with the threshold for this swimmer is 176 and for this swimmer is 164. So for this swimmer, this standardized method, general method, would kind of work just on the verge, and for this swimmer it would just be too easy, right? The same thing with as I just said, with fixed blood lactate scores. 4 millimoles for the second threshold, so anaerobic threshold would work for this swimmer, but it wouldn't work for this swimmer. And what you can see nicely in here is that despite the fact they have similar maximum heart rate score and similar time trial time for 200, they have different profile. For this swimmer, they are slower with both aerobic threshold and anaerobic threshold. But for some reason, the maximum speed they are able to reach, so the maximum aerobic speed they reach in the step test, is very similar to what the swimmer number 2 achieved. So automatically we would think, well, this swimmer is weaker aerobically, but for some reason they were able to kind of catch up with the swimmer number 2. And that is because of anaerobic system. This swimmer has stronger battery, but we wouldn't know that. We don't know how big that battery is, how big the anaerobic system is. So that's why it's important that we come up with a test, or we are looking for solutions where we can kind of understand how the performance is created and why somebody can perform better, or how you can get somebody to perform better. So I would say, like, you know, when I was trying to bring a solution to world of swimming, I had quite a few coaches when they said, but how do I imagine that working? You know, like, if I actually understand what we are kind of dealing with on daily basis in terms of the coaching and managing parents, managing athletes, and managing our own families. And then, yes, swimming is very different to cycling and running, where we have a lot of data. So when we kind of think about swimming, we have to deal with technological and environmental constraints. So we have to look for simple solutions than cycling or running. We are also dealing with multidisciplinary nature of swimming, where we're dealing with so many strokes and so many events with so many pools. And on top of that, swimming is so complicated that the training zones are very narrow. So if we make a small mistake, then we can easily go into another zone and just flip, right? And then, as I said, we are dealing with limited time, resources, and expertise. So we do have to come up with a solution in the future, not just now, where we can kind of improve the profiling system to the stage where we need to consider all these factors, but at the same time for it to be valid because of those narrow zones. So now I'm gonna jump into actual 3MT, and I was very lucky that at the time when I was doing my master's, I was a part of the group where they were preparing for the sub 2-hour marathon project, where my supervisor actually explained 3-minute all-out test for me. And I kind of couldn't believe that you could have such a short test, and it could give you a nice overview of the physiological systems we are having in our body. So just to kind of give you a brief overview, the 3-minute all-out test, when we run, it starts all out from the beginning. You can see the speed is going to reach its maximum. And as I said at the beginning, we have a kind of, like, if you think about it, we have a battery. And as soon as we start working hard, the battery is being depleted. You can see that on the speed. So it's being depleted. And once we deplete the anaerobic battery, then the highest speed we are able to maintain is our anaerobic threshold or critical speed. It's the maximum speed we can maintain in terms of the aerobic system. So that kind of, I really like that kind of idea that you're going to just reach peak speed. It's going to give you a nice overview of your ATP PCR system. Then you're going to reach your critical speed. It's going to give you a nice overview of the aerobic system. And then finally, if I was to kind of shade the area underneath this curve and above the threshold, we can then see the size of the battery I was talking about the anaerobic system. And on top of that, if you have a physiologist with you and you have the VO2 data, you can see that it's going to also, during the 3MT, you can read your VO2 max, but that's not really important for club level. I just wanted to show you that the concept does allow you to reach VO2 max as you would reach in the classical step test where people or federations are sometimes measuring the VO2 peak. So what I was working on during my PhD was to develop a 3MT in swimming, and this is how you can see how the 3MT works. You have the same profile in swimming as you have in cycling or running. You're gonna reach your peak speed. You can see how the battery is depleted. Once you deplete the battery, it's gonna level off. And then if I was to color this area underneath this curve, I have the battery. So again, I'm just gonna repeat myself. When you go all out, you're gonna reach your peak speed. Those are 25-meter splits. You're gonna reach your critical speed aerobic system. When we shade this area underneath this curve and above the critical speed, we're gonna get a battery, anaerobic system. And also we are adding a new parameter just to give them a little bit more detailed overview of your swimmer. It's called functional speed reserve. That's gonna show us the difference between aerobic ceiling and anaerobic ceiling. So mechanical ceiling, peak speed and critical speed. What you can also see in these tiles is how much data you get from a 3MT when you run through the protocol. I'm going to explain to you in a second. So you're going to get the critical speed for the 25-meter pool that includes a turn. So you get the data in meters per second and as a 100-meter split. What we also do, we run a conversion factor in order for the critical speed on the data to be used in the 50-meter pool, so you don't have to do the test in both pools. Again, you get the speed and 100-meter pace. Then you also get clean critical speed, and that is there for you to kind of see how much of the speed in that 25-meter pool is generated from swimming, and also from turning. So you can kind of see if somebody improved, whether that was because of their turning ability improved or whether swimming improved. Also, if you have an open water swimmers or triathletes, this speed works well for prediction of performances for those guys because it doesn't include turn. Then you have the data for anaerobic capacity. So you have the peak speed in meters per second in here and in swimming pace in here. So you have both data points. Then you have functional speed reserve. That's what I just said. It's a difference between peak speed and critical speed. Then you have the size of the battery. And then you also have an overview of swimmers' turning ability. So you will get your 5-meter intersection, 10 meters out, so push off, and 15-meter total, so 5 in and 10 out together. You get the average time for all turns swimmer took, the fastest time, and the slowest time. And then you obviously get your swimming paces for 25, 50, 75, 100 meters as the fastest splits, because that's what coaches like to see as well. On top of this, because we are taking the stroke rates in the middle of each 25, you can see an overview of the stroke mechanics profile. So you can see how the swimmers are working with their stroke in order to generate the speed we see in the 3MT. So you can see how the distance per stroke is behaving, whether it is nice and consistent or it's all over the place and the swimmers can't hold the technique. Or you can see that it is dropping at the beginning and then is leveling off. It means that they are slipping the water when they have too high stroke rate. So they might need to work on that. And you can also see stroke index, which is probably the most powerful tool in terms of the economy of the swimmer that we can count. It's a combination of multiplying distance by stroke by speed. So if we kind of evaluate the 3MT against the parameters that I was talking about at the beginning, during my PhD, I was actually checking the validity of the 3-minute all-out test and the data we get from there. And compared to other methods, so step tests, for example, or time trials, it has a great validity. In terms of the reliability, so the consistency and sensitivity, it performed nice and consistently. So we know that when we measure the results with the 3MT or the parameters with 3MT and somebody improves or gets worse, we know that's what is actually happening, and it's not because the test is full of errors. And finally, in terms of the practicality, the test can be repeated on a regular basis because it only takes 3 minutes. And you can then use the data to prescribe things for the following cycle. It can be applied across all strokes, and you can also use it for pull and kick condition. For example, in breaststroke, with kicking, that's proving to be very useful. It takes 3 minutes, so you can kind of get through loads of swimmers in a very short space of time. If you have, for example, 3 lanes, then you can run 3 swimmers at the same time. They just have to be stuck on the opposite side of the pool so they don't pace off each other. And then obviously you only need a stopwatch in order to complete a full profile. So if I was to summarize, you get aerobic component from a 3MT, anaerobic component, you get a turning ability, you get a technical ability, and you get some useful splits from the 3MT that we know are actually influencing, or these parameters that we derive are actually influencing the performance we see in the pool. And when we kind of compare the 3MT against the protocols that are out there, you can see that against the other tests, it performs well in terms of that it gives us aerobic and anaerobic insight. It gives us turn and stroke mechanics. It takes short amount of the time. From the platform we provide, we also give you training prescription tool that you can use to prescribe training processes for your swimmers, and it has a great validity. Just to kind of come back to an example when we were using PB Plus method, there is a nice example where 3MT kind of allows us to shed more light on the swimmers with two similar personal best times for 100 freestyle. You can see with swimmer 1, they have 55.2. With swimmer number 2, they have 54.9. So that's a very small difference between these two guys in terms of the personal best. But you can see the physiological profile is completely different. This swimmer has higher critical speed, quite a lot, compared to this swimmer number 2. But actually, this swimmer has much stronger anaerobic system than this one. So if I was to, for example, go with the PB plus method and I prescribe, I don't know, PB plus 10, then it's very likely I'm going to push this swimmer too hard and they're not going to be able to manage as many reps as this guy. Right, so that's what I'm just trying to say, that we have to be very careful when we use that kind of method to prescribe training, that we could end up easily in the situation where people have very different systems. So if you're actually aware of that and you at least understand the threshold or anaerobic threshold or critical speed, you can individualize training sessions better. And then you know who needs to work on what. For example, with swimmer number 2, they have great peak speed and great battery, but very poor critical speed. This swimmer number 1 has amazing critical speed and good battery, but lacks peak speed. So we then know what to target in order to give these guys the best chance to improve. So in terms of the protocol, so if you wanna complete the 3MT, you need 25-meter pool or 25-yard pool. We are gonna also have long course pool soon module, but for now we have 25-meter pool or 25 yards. So you have 2 options. You have 25-meter pool where you just take the splits. So every time they touch the wall with their feet for backstroke and freestyle, you're gonna hit the stopwatch. And in the middle of each pool, you're gonna take the stroke rate from 3 consecutive cycles. Or if you want the most advanced version where you're gonna get clean swimming, clean critical speed swimming, and also the turning ability, you need to take splits every 10, 10, and 5. So you have 10 push-off, 10 clean, and 5 into the wall. And again, 10-meter push-off, 10-meter clean, and 5-meter into the wall. And again, you are taking the stroke rates in the middle of each pool. What you could also do is to use video analysis, or what we also do for bigger federations, we ask the clubs to take a video footage and then we analyze it for them, but you can see how it looks. You have a 10-meter mark, 10-meter mark, 5-meter mark, and again 10, 10, and 5. What is probably the most important is that swimmers warm up accordingly. So if you want to give them 10, 5, or 15 minutes warm up, they need to warm up. They just can't go and push up and swim. what I would say, allow them to have some speed bursts in there so they can feel for the water at higher speeds, but don't overdo it, because every time they're gonna do speed, they're gonna eat into the battery I was talking about. So allow them to have sufficient rest between the warm up and an actual test. But there is no warm up protocol that I would recommend. You can completely choose your warm up, but try to be consistent when you kind of repeat the testing. The test starts from a push-off start, and the most important thing in the 3MT that the swimmer swims as hard and as fast as they possibly can, but with the best technique they can. There is no point just to push off and then spin the arms at the expense of the technique. So you swim as hard as you can with the best technique you can, and at any given time during the test, and you are trying to reach and maintain the highest speed possible. You can't hold anything in the reserve, because if you speed up at the end, then it's gonna overestimate the critical speed, and so you're not gonna have true data, not valid data. You are not allowed to tell swimmers how much time they have left. You just allowed to push them as hard as you can. And when the 3-minute mark has passed, you allow the swimmer to finish the full lap. So we have the full data point for the last test, and then you stop them, and then you can transcribe the data on a piece of paper or into Excel, or you can transcribe it directly to the platform, and then you save it, and then you are in on our platform. But it's very important before I actually jump into platform that you allow the swimmers to run the test at least once before you go, like when you're actually going to use the data in the for the proper testing and for the full analysis. It doesn't mean that you have to run it one by one, but at least try to do 3-minute all out as a part of the main set when they're going to push as hard as they can for 3 minutes. So I'm going to jump into the platform just for you to see how the processes work. So 1 second. So hopefully you can see the actual platform. Once you log in to the platform and you created your account, you can go to data upload, and you can choose the swimmer you want to upload your data for. So I'm going to choose this one. I can put the date. Today is, what's that, 15th of June 2023. I'm going to choose the stroke I want to test them in. I'm going to choose the pool, so 25-meter pool. Then I'm going to choose the condition, whether that is full stroke or kick, pool, fins. And then I'm going to come for data input. So I can choose whether I want 10 and 5-meter splits to be entered. If I have the stroke rate, then I can enter the stroke rate here. If I don't have the stroke rate, I'm not going to input the stroke rate in here. If I want 25-meter splits with the stroke rate, I essentially upload or create my format for the data I actually have. But just bear in mind that if you take 10, 10, 5 with the stroke rate, you have the most complex analysis. Then you're going to hit the upload the data. Data is going to be uploaded, and within few seconds you actually have the report for your swimmer. So if you go to your report, you're going to find your athlete. You're going to choose the stroke you tested them in, the condition, the pool, and the date. Then you're going to click on searching for the data, and you can see the report immediately. So you can see the critical speed, exactly what we were talking about, the anaerobic capacity parameters, turning ability parameters, swimming pace parameters. We can see the profile. You can see the stroke mechanics profile with the actual data reported. And when you test regularly, you can actually see the trends in the data. So it actually allows you to track long-term change in the parameters that we view are important and underpin the performance. So you can see how according to your plan or what you prescribe during the season, whether the plan hit the outcomes that you planned for. So you can see that for critical speed and peak speed. You can see that for battery and functional speed reserve. And at the bottom, you have the table with changes in the technique, time split, and turning ability. And then if you want, you can click through the dates to see individual profiles, and you can also download the PDF so you can share that and review the results with your swimmers or parents or in between coaches. And finally, we have the tool that is allowing you to prescribe the training sessions for your swimmers. This tool is not there to change your philosophy. You can use it as a guidance. In each table we have, you have the information about how to improve each parameter, so you can use it to kind of educate yourself or kind of double check yourself if your understanding is right against what the research suggests. If you want, you can essentially use it to program sessions for your swimmers. So you can create your tables and then you can download the PDF and put it on a board. The good thing about the prescription tool is that it's dragging the data immediately from the test. So you can then individualize the training sessions based on the physiological profile your swimmer has. What we're also going to be doing is we're going to provide you with the benchmarks for each event. So you kind of going to get the deficit profile. So if your swimmer is a, I don't know, 100 freestyler, and we're gonna get the 3MT data from the test, we will be then able to provide you what they need to work on in order to kind of reach a good level of performance. So then you will be able to take the data, come into pace prescription to us. Let's say there is a 100-meter freestyler we had on our example in my slides. We say that they need to work on critical speed. So I then know I need to go to this zone 2, maybe zone 3, and use these two tables in order to prescribe the sessions for them. I think that's pretty much all what I needed to cover for the talk. We have 9 minutes left. So thank you guys for listening to me. And if you have any questions now or after the talk, then just let me know. What I also wanted to share with you was the demo account. John, did you give them demo account before or not?
Yeah, we'll send that out off the back of this one. So we've got those credentials.
Okay, that's fine.
And for those of you who already have accounts, it's easy because you'll be on the system. But following on from last week's talk on race analysis, when we have an athlete who is struggling in the back end of the race, that's a common observation we have in 1s, 2s, and up. Often we were making an assumption it's a lack of conditioning, a lack of critical speed or aerobic capacity. And this helps us to kind of like look into that situation and understand whether that is the case, to confirm that we need to do the right kind of base work. Or do we have an athlete who's actually anaerobically, overpowered, as we would say, or out of balance in terms of the event they're swimming? And the benchmarks really help us to establish that. So, taking away false assumptions on we're going to do this type of work because this is a racing observation, often that is valid, but the 3MT helps us to just improve our confidence and insight in that way. So yeah, that's why I'm very excited to be working with Eva on this. So guys, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to just unmute yourselves and ask away now.
Can I tell something? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So guys, I just wanted to confirm that I'm beginning to work with Eva on June since winter this year, and since that we swimming club broke up 8 records of the club for the relays, and so many records of the person achievement of the swimmers. And I want to say a huge thank you to helping me to move my Mannschaft to the other level. I'm working in Germany. So, and yeah, I have to say it's just, I need to totally break down in my coaching performance of the training, thanks to Eva. which one helped me to set up exactly the right program and exactly the right sets for the swimmers. Individual approach, helping me so much to move my team to the high level. And in this case, I'm working not in a big club, it's a middle club, but we get through to the best swimming clubs, the top 10 top, the best in Germany. And it's now it's we got qualified for the Open Deutschmeisterschaft, 8 relays, which one awesome. So that's why I want to say thank you so much for your help. And this is what you develop, Eva and John. This is something unique, and this is what I'm looking for ages. And now I'm really pleased to work with you, and thank you so much for your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina.
That's cool. I think that you make a good point there, Ina, which is it's not easy to review your philosophy or to review the way you're working as a coach. And it does take some ongoing reflection and, you know, asking questions. And I think that when you have the metrics, it's the right thing to do, even if it is difficult, because you will take, you know, 4 steps forwards instead of, you know, there's a lot of guesswork in any coaching, of course there is, but removing that guesswork is what's right for the athlete. So yeah, it's cool to hear that. Anyone else with anything for Eva? Okay, guys, listen, Eva's, I'm going to send out Eva's email address as well, so you can pester her, you know, from the comfort of your own email. But just a very quick note to say thank you for your time, Eva, and your hard work as always. And thanks for everyone for jumping on. And yeah, I look forward to seeing those who haven't registered already create an account on the system. That is the best way to get going. Register for an account, invite some athletes and run a test, you know, and then you'll really start to see things explained in terms of linking training output, racing output with the realities for each athlete. So that'd be my recommendation, but we will follow this up with a copy of the recording and also some demo credentials for you all.